Hello, guys.
Hello.
Wait.
Howdy.
Hey, hey,
Hello.
yes. Hey. All right. And so with that said, guys, everything is down in the description box. So all the links to connect with these guys are all down there too. And I'm going to take a real quick second to introduce everybody, but officially welcome to the first episode of Watchmen of Certainty. This is something I have been wanting to do for a very long time, to have a panel on to talk through current events and really just do it at the end of a month, because I feel like so much happens now in a 30 to 31 day span of time that we don't have a shortage of events to talk about. So with that said, I'm going to introduce everybody going, I don't know if that's left to right or not. I'm not sure looking at me, but the first guy next to me, David, why don't you wave? That's David Holland.
right
You guys
hand,
might
okay.
remember. Yeah, that's David. Y'all might remember David. He's been on the channel before. He owns Alpha and Omega Gold. We've talked about, all the things that people are doing to kind of prepare for different things. So if you're looking for stuff on precious metals and things of that nature, his links are down below. And then, of course, next to David is our favorite pastor from Ireland, Pastor Gary McKibben. Pastor Gary, welcome back.
It's good to be back. It's like the Brady Bunch here, isn't it? Just everybody.
It is. It is. And then down below me, we have everybody's favorite Southerner, Ricky Scuparo over at End Time Headlines. Ricky, go ahead and wave. Everybody knows Ricky. And then, of course, next to Ricky is Mondo Gonzales. Everybody recognizes Mondo. He's like our resident archaeologist, scholar, Jewish studies. He has a lot of letters behind his name, right? Right, Mondo? Kind of, sort of?
Just wannabe letters.
All right. Okay. Everyone knows you from Prophecy Watcher, so welcome back, Mondo. And then, of course, next to Mondo is Pete Garcia. He is has his channel Rev 10. He's an amazing writer. His Substack is amazing, and Pete is known around this community for doing 3-hour live streams. That is what he is known for, right, Pete?
Only 3 hours. I had 5 hours before.
Yeah.
I think 3 hours might be your norm. So, well, thank you guys so much for coming on today. I'm so excited about this. Like I said, it's mainly just that I think it's so good to get together with folks who are paying attention to the times. And we all look to you guys. We know you don't claim to be experts about anything necessarily, but you guys just have your, your hand on the pulse of everything that's going on. So let's start with question 1, and we can just round robin. Whoever wants to start, you guys piggyback off of each other. Looking back over the last month, what event or development stood out to y'all the most from a Bible prophecy perspective?
I think Pete should go first.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things I think that really caught my attention. Just the other day, the Sanhedrin invoked, I guess they're invoking the heavens to go ahead and send the Messiah, that now is the time for the Messiah. So that's from Israel. And then from the geopolitical stuff is the coalition that's beginning to form from the Gulf kingdoms around the issue with Iran. And then the pairing of Israel with Ukraine against Russia. And, we just start to see things kind of falling into place right now. So I've been very interested in all these ideas and topics.
Mm-hmm. That's funny you mentioned that. Right before y'all joined the stream, David was first. I mentioned the Sanhedrin thing because I saw that yesterday. Ricky had shared that on his app. He's got a free app. Everybody can download End Time Headlines. So I get a lot of headlines from Ricky. And then we had our Certainty Remnant Underground video meetup last night. We all meet up together once a month. We're going through the Coming Kingdom series right now with Andy Woods. And those discussions always spark different things. And that came up from one of the members there. And I said, I'm going to ask them about this tomorrow. So that was mine that I put on here. And I saved, let me read the quote, because Tavi read this quote last night when she was reading this, and what stuck out to her. So let me read that. But if somebody wants to say something else while I'm pulling that back up, since my phone refreshed, go ahead.
Yep. I'll say something about that because I agree. That's why P went first. Because what's interesting in Israel is there is, just like in the first century in the Gospels, you have factions. And right now there is a very strong lack of a clear authority. Now, the Sanhedrin, originally reinstituted in around 2004, but still they are accepted by all of the consensus rabbis there. And so when this it's kind of a self-appointed Sanhedrin makes this declaration, you still have others that are resisting it, and others that are saying it doesn't have the authority based on even Jewish tradition and whatever to even say something like this. We look at this and go, as a Christian, you can't tell God what to do, but that's kind of the way it was phrased. But it's interesting that there's a principle here that it comes up in the Gospels. And the Gospels, if you read them in a way, you can see some of the rabbinic flavors there. And one of them is in Matthew 16 and Matthew 18, where Jesus is describing, and he uses the language, whatever you bind on earth is already bound in heaven. And that's the language that you have in the rabbinic writings. And so this is what they're coming, is they're going to say, we are going to make this declaration, and then we're going to bind heaven to follow it and to do it. But the second thing I would say is there's the lack of authority, and that's going to be changing. That I expect that to change. But the other thing to notice in the comment, in their declaration, was 100% an association between the temple and the Messiah. And so for them, they when they say this, their evidence that the Messiah will be here is his ability to cause the temple to be built. And so, and of course, for most of us, we think that when the Antichrist comes along, based on Daniel 9:27, that he's going to cause the covenant to prevail for the people, for the many, which is Israel. So if somebody could come along and do that, automatically their boxes are checked. So I totally agree, Pete. I think this is phenomenal. It's setting a tone for sure.
So let me read the quote. Go for it. Go. No, go ahead, Pastor Gary.
I was just going to say, do you think that, because one of the things that I'm noticing in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks is a real leap forward towards ecumenicalism. This, if you look at King Charles, the declaration of being a defender of the faiths, if you see all the excitement around the Noahide Congress in November at Herzog's residence, and then the declaration that we get out from the Sanhedrin, it kind of, to me, makes me think that everybody's looking for a way, but it's not the way. They're looking to, there's an expectation of the divine. There's an expectation of, I think each monotheistic religion is having this expectation that we're in the end of times, but it's at the same time it's a broad road being painted for everybody. It's this kind of open door avenue. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but.
Go ahead, Lauren, and say, I know you wanted to read that, and then I was going to say something after you get done doing that.
Okay, so this is, Ricky, this is from your article that you had. It says, Rabbi Josh Wander, a member of the court who participated in the deliberations, later described the discussion. He and another rabbi had dissented, warning of the dangers of acceleration. And this is the quote. By speeding things up, we also risk making things a lot worse in the short term and much more painful, Wander said. He linked the ruling to the events of October 7th, describing that day as a massive leap in the redemption process that also brought profound suffering. Looking ahead, he offered a stark caution. Quote, if this has the effect that we hope it has or believe it has, you should buckle up because things are about to get really rough very soon. And that's the quote that Tavi read last night in the underground when this discussion came up. So y'all talk amongst yourselves on that.
Well, the only thing I was, the only thing I was going to interject here, I took some notes. It's funny because that was probably the number one thing that leaped out to me as far as major events. Something I want to interject here is that we have to keep in mind that the Messiah this is my opinion, I believe that the quote-unquote Mashiach or Messiah that these people are anticipating is going to be the Antichrist of the Bible. And I think this is laying the welcome mat for this because, again, this comes from a Talmudic concept of this Messiah that they're expecting. They want this Messiah who's going to defeat Israel's enemies, that will bring this, usher in this peace and reconciliation with God. And it's interesting in this details of this petition that they made, or this decree to heaven, there was 3 points. Number one was the removal of their enemies, which is they called their corrupt forces and hostile nations. Number two was they petitioned God for the ushering in of the Messiah. They want to accelerate it. And number two, and Mondo pointed this out, the connection with the third temple. Well, what's interesting is we all know this. When you study what the Antichrist is going to do, I believe he's going to fulfill their desires, but it's not going to be the Mashiach or the Messiah that they're anticipating. So to me, this is huge news, because I think it's laying a welcome mat right out for this, for the deception of, because we know that there has to be a third temple to be constructed for the Antichrist to set his residence in and rule, during his reign, during the tribulation and whatnot. So all this is, again, another major step towards that.
It's fascinating. What's fascinating is that at the same time the Sanhedrin is calling for the Messiah to be sent from heaven, you've got the Twelvers in Iran are trying to create a global revolution so that their Mahdi can come.
Yeah.
You've got people in the West all gearing up for the midterm elections and for the 2028 elections, and all around the world, we're all looking for human solutions to these unseemingly insolvable problems that we have. And I definitely think that we're in this messianic age, going back to even when the red heifers were first introduced and all of that years ago. I think that this is kind of spurring on. Things like this are continuing to push us further into this, what the Jews would deem the messianic age. So.
Well, that's another big piece of news too. I mean, Mondo, you're the heifer expert on here, but there were what is it, 2 more red heifers that were born this month that they were talking about? Yeah, I mean that's out now too. So it's I don't know, y'all. Everything just kind of seems like it's just trucking on down the lane,
Yeah, they have. It's interesting over the past. Really, they kind of did it secretly in the one sense, in that you have the National Institute for Red Heifer Research, in Israel now, and it's not connected directly with the Temple Institute, which again,
Right.
it's a surprise. And so, you had the first heifer that was born in Galilee, but it had an ear tag, and so it's pretty universal that one is not going to be accepted. But then, of course, right after that, you had another one. But now, what you see with the Red Heifer Institute is their timing. Is they developed this institute where they're going to be looking at and making all these basically rules, these halakhic type rules that would then hypothetically be binding on the community, on the Jewish religious community when it comes time. So the fact that we're even talking about red heifers and red heifer institutes and stuff is so phenomenal. From 100 years ago or 200 years ago, it's I still find it fascinating that people deny that we're in the end of the age, and yet you have all this language that is here. It's part of what we do, and we have our brothers and sisters, I say it all the time, that are maybe all millennial, and I just don't. They have no concept for this or no understanding except rejection, and you're it just talking about not being relevant. This stuff is here for a reason, and as Pete said, there is an absolute messianic fervor, but Josh Wander, I was in a conversation with Adam Berkowitz, who writes on all this on Israel 365 News, and he was talking, he's good friends with Josh, and he was saying the same thing, that there's a subtlety here, and the reason why they were warning about this is because they recognize that in order for the messianic times to arrive, it's not like the Islamic where it's necessarily done out of chaos. For the rabbinic mind, it needs to be done with repentance. And so they know that the state of Israel is not in a place of righteousness. And so they know as well, to get there is going to require a lot of trouble. Now, from our perspective, we know Zechariah 13 and Jeremiah 30. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. So what they're saying is correct. It's just not necessarily in the way, as we understand it.
Yeah, well said.
Do you think, even with all of that happening, that there's a lot of people trying to push the timing in, but God is kind of cementing or putting his stamp upon the timing? I'm thinking that, was it last week, the beams from Solomon's temple, the wooden beams, 2,600-year-old beams found and unearthed. It's kind of like God sort of saying, yes, This is the timing. We're in this timing. We're in this season. Watch and be sober of mind. I'm thinking about all the stuff that's actually happening surrounding this as well. You know, the deconstruction of Europe. We're watching that right now. 49,000 on Thursday crossing from Morocco into Spain, and
Yeah.
there's been killings off the back of that already. And you know, we have 16,000 in Dublin coming. Asylum seekers came into Dublin Airport this week. Thousands in boat crossings, and we're seeing the Red Green Alliance to deconstruct Europe. You know, we can just speak from the UK alone. We now have Andy Burnham in office as Prime Minister, and if anybody's paid attention to any of his manifesto or his rhetoric, he has a manifesto called Manchesterism 2.0 that has been endorsed, publicly endorsed by the Fabian Society. And that should tell everybody all they need to know about it. You know, this is the deconstruction, purposeful deconstruction of the West. We've been told that there's a really good likelihood in the next few months that we will all be hit with a death tax. So that means that if I die, and the contents of my wallet will be taxed, the clothes that I have will be taxed, rather than them just being passed on to my kids. If I have a watch, it will be taxed, the value of the watch. This is what they're all proposing, and it's like 2030 is still first and foremost in the mindset of Europe, you know?
Wow. Yeah, you guys seem to have, I mean, this is again why we like to have you on, Pastor Gary, because, you know, you're the eyes and ears of what's going on across the pond. And we know that that's coming here, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I know. I like listening to you guys speak, so I could just sit here. But I know Lauren didn't invite me on to just sit here and be a mannequin. So my view is a little bit different, not from what you guys believe, but just from where I'm seeing things. I have quite a few kids, so I don't get to look up and see out as much as I would like. But where I live is, you know, the third highest concentration of Jewish people in the world here in Southern California. And I work, there's probably 3 or 4 of them within 100 feet of where I'm sitting right now, you know, going about their lives or going about their, you know, their offices and things of that nature. And as a Christian, as a, you know, pre-trib, as we all believe the same, how this is going to play out, you know, there is an imperceptible feeling when you just are around them. It's, you know, you can only explain it as like a God thing. And you can feel, and when you talk and interact, that there is probably a universal, I don't know if you would say unhappiness or discontent amongst the population. Even here where they're, you know, wildly successful, there is just a discontentment that you feel like God is saying, hey, you know, there's a home for you, or you're being pulled back to those promises that were made, you know, so many thousands of years ago. And I look at it, I think Pastor Gary just mentioned it, as like a whole. It's like maybe it was Pete, but it's like a whole thing. And it's just like a whole pizza, but there's these little slices that make up the whole thing. And every day they're being added. You're getting more toppings on that slice. And sometimes it's, you know, heavily Jewish. Sometimes it's you're seeing, you know, America being, you know, withdrawn. And I saw something this morning, which was pretty, I don't know, it kind of just opened up my eyes a little bit, but they were talking about the invasion there on the Strait of Gibraltar, and how Russia and China were particularly probably behind that, because what they were saying is that they were looking at the United States eventually weaponizing that choke point. And if they have a control of one side of it, it will prevent a U.S. You know, setup, and they could do something like Iran does with the Strait of Hormuz or the Bab el-Mandab. And there's a lot of change, and it looks like the U.S. is being pushed out of the Middle East, and there's a lot of changes even on our homeland with the rise of anti-Semitism and the push for communism, which just has the same flavor of that turning that's happening again. But it seems to be happening at not just a faster pace, but at a exponentially accelerated pace, which is, it's something to see and quite crazy to behold when, you know, you look down and you look up and you got 10 news stories that are major. So, but yes, I fully agree with what you guys are saying. It's crazy times.
Very
Do any of
well.
y'all have anything you want to add to that before we move on? Any other events or anything that are on your mind or heart that you're kind of paying attention to?
Well, go ahead, Gary. You're about to say
No,
something.
you go. You're okay. I'm always about to say something, so I'll go.
I was going to talk about the other thing that's really been kind of all over the news is the data centers. And a friend of mine had mentioned something to me last night that I had never considered, and tying the data centers with Trump's plan for the Golden Dome. And although there is not a direct, necessarily a direct correlation between the data centers and the Golden Dome system that he wants to put over the United States, they do share a lot of the same infrastructure requirements. And for example, like both the Golden Dome and all of the reasons that they're putting these data centers up for like AI model training, cloud computing, military AI research, etc. The thing that they share with Golden Dome is that Golden Dome requires thousands of satellites. It requires real time sensor fusion. It requires artificial intelligence, high performance computing, fast networking, and large scale command and control systems. So I wonder too if maybe the White House is anticipating some threat in the near future. And so, the question that we've been asking a lot is why are they throwing these things up next to neighborhoods? Why are they throwing them up in these all over the South when these things require, massive amounts of electricity and water and things like that? So maybe that has something to do with this. That there's a perceived threat that's already in existence, and we the population aren't really privy to what that threat is necessarily. So if he can get these things up and get them operational in the next couple of years, by the time that threat begins to manifest, that Golden Dome, is already kind of in place and ready to go. So that's another thing that may be answering the question is why we have so many and why are they seemingly in the most random places,
So, you know what? That's perfect because this ties into question 3. So, we'll come back to question 2. And question 3 is centered around data centers and the AI infrastructure. The questions that I have for you guys today came from the Certainty Remnant Underground. A couple of the members had asked some things, and I was like, these are such good questions. Let me save them for the panel. So, the question was, we've seen an explosion in data centers being built around the world. Is this simply technological progress, or should Christians be paying attention to what this infrastructure could enable in the future? I would love to see you guys answer that. Pastor Gary, I know that y'all collectively have more data centers than any of us, and I think it's Texas has a ton of them. I know here in my state of Missouri, in our area, we've got a ban on data centers for at least the next 6 months in this area, I think our county. But I also know there are data centers going up in other counties that are more rural, which is scary because I don't know about y'all, but like I'm in suburbia right now. Don't love it. Eventually like to get out into the country, but I don't want to be next to a data center. So I would love for y'all to give your input on what y'all think is going on with this stuff. I definitely think it's got footprints of the beast system all over it personally. I don't think the Antichrist and the false prophet and their minions can run everything without being attached to everything. I know y'all have probably seen all the stuff about the flock cameras. They're everywhere. You're being monitored from the time you leave your front door. You got all this tech in your car. You got cameras at your stop sign. You got cameras at the stoplight. You got cameras at the Target. It's everywhere. So you are being hacked and tracked everywhere you go. And now we got these data centers collecting data. So what say y'all? What do y'all think is going on?
Well, can I put on my tinfoil hat for a second?
Yes, absolutely. I should have brought one. I usually have one on my desk.
I do actually have one. Someone in my
Yes, me
church
too.
handed it to me one time. But
It's perfect.
when you look at the data centers, so actually America has more data centers, but it's obviously geographically much more there's much more expanse in America than there is in the UK. We have 523 to 560 that we know about, with 100 more planned of super AI centers by 2030. America has, I think, a maximum at the minute of about 5,000. Now, if you take what the biggest thing that I look at in this is the water. If you take what they require to cool down and to keep them going, the higher estimate is 1 million to 1.5 million gallons per data center per day. So if you times that by the amount of data centers, what we actually found before, because I done a program on this, is that in the UK we're on par with domestic use, right? So the data centers already are requiring the same amount of water that households are using on a daily basis. If you take that and you combine it with the UK government's emergency warning that came out, telling us that our water infrastructure is about to collapse, and everybody has to be prepared. We have to store up your water now, buy bottles of water because they won't be available because of the Iranian conflict and all of this. I think all of that is pointing to two things, right? One is a depop moment, right? A moment in which those who are in power will turn around and say, well, what means more to us? Is it the individual living in their house with their family, or is it the data centers that allows us to observe, regulate, and control? You know, we've had the rollout of LFR cameras here. Our police have LFR cameras. They're live facial recognition. They have them on phones, so that if you're walking past, you will pop up and all your history pops up. And that needs an awful lot of power, but it's at the expense of human beings. Now, if you combine that, I think it works out 98 or 9.8 billion to 9.3 billion. So 9.8 billion gallons of water in America used on a daily basis. 9.3 billion is required for data centers. Now that shows you that at some point, whether it's going to be, and I think they're going to turn around and say, oh, this is climate. This is why you've all got to submit to Gaia worship and climate worship, and you know. But I see that at play, and I think it's very obvious. And I'll shut up for a bit. Sorry.
Well, here's two inevitable things. Number one, these are not going anywhere anytime soon. Did a little research on this. In the U.S. alone, there's roughly 5,500 by 2030. 5,500 is going to double again by 2030. There's already roughly. Go ahead, what was you saying?
I just said there's that year again, 2030.
Right.
Keep hearing that.
And there's roughly 12,000 data centers globally. They're investing $7 trillion over the next 4 years, $10 trillion over the next 10 years. And what's interesting, Pete, I think you sent me this video, and I really kind of dissected this, and I was stunned by some of the information. But a lot of this capital is being drawn from private sectors, saving accounts, pension accounts, 401ks, and insurance companies. All this is funding this AI infrastructure. Now, we know that there's a major backlash happening right now. People are fed up with it. Whole towns are trying to get it, stop this. And so, you've got this. So these private companies are kind of changing their strategy up. And now they're offering, this one shocked me, and I had to actually research it to make sure it was true, and it is. They're offering, and I don't know what cities these are. I should have pulled that information. But in certain cities in America, they're offering residents compensation, on their utility bills or even their internet bills if they will put a mini data center in their home. Now, who in their right mind would do that? That was one of the things that was asked. And when we did a podcast on this, and there was people in the chat saying, who would do this? Well, the answer is desperate people. Right now, inflation, we've got, the cost of groceries, living, all this stuff. We know that desperate measures will come from desperate people that are desperate to pay their bills. They will do these things, and they know this. And then I even heard a proposal for entire new residentials being built that they're even proposing to install these mini data centers in brand new builds. So could you imagine going house hunting and you find a nice neighborhood only to find that these things has these mini data centers built into the construction of this? And these things are supposed to they're supposed to provide I think it's 100-mile radius of information. So number one thing, inevitable, they're not going away. They're only going to increase. They're going to override people. They're going to do, they're using eminent domain. They're doing all these things in these measures. Number two is one thing that we've learned about this is the climate change propaganda is just that. It's propaganda. Because think about it, guys. What, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when at the World Economic Forum, when they did these meetings, their number one, one of their top three, projections and what they were fighting was quote unquote climate change. Well, think about this. Look at the extraordinary amounts of electricity, water for cooling, uh, the strain on the power grids. Where was it in Virginia? There was a glitch on the power grid, and it actually caused all kinds of anomalies and issues that happen with residents of Virginia. And they're warning. They keep putting out these warnings across 17 states. Now they will tell you it's because of the strain of the heat and excess, but you have to wonder. So you got this, and then the wastewater that is being, because you have to pump out, there's millions of gallons of water a month that it's operate through these facilities. So they have to dump this somewhere. They have to empty this water. And then there's been places like Ohio and Kentucky where data centers are putting strain on local aquifers, and also the chemicals that they use, the glycol, I believe you call this, the nitrates, the PFAS. I mean, could you imagine the carcinogens in that? So again,
Right.
if these people were that concerned about climate change, we wouldn't be seeing this. So I think one of the things that's happening through this is we're seeing the mask come off, and we're seeing the true agenda being revealed. If people will
That's
wake up to it.
That is very well said, Ricky. And I want to read two things. Let me add these to the broadcast. So Vindog is here today. Vindog said the data centers are going to cause people to be pushed into 15-minute cities, devalue the home, so that the government can have a hostile takeover of them all. And that's an interesting theory. Lance and I have talked a little bit about that, because again, it's all happening in rural areas. Whoops. And then Anthony, one of the moderators, mentioned this. He said, I think it's interesting that the only place you can live where there's almost no chance of a data center popping up within a mile of you is in the city. And that was my point. We're seeing them come up in conversations around rural, what you would call rural areas here in Missouri. And I'm going, I know these country people don't want this here. So
Right.
just very interesting,
Yeah,
Mondo, you have a thought?
Oh, go ahead, Mondo.
Go ahead. I'll go after you. That's fine.
I certainly think that is. I think if you look kind of over history, there's always this, hey, we're gonna, and there's a certain term for it, and forgive me, I forget it, but it's where you go really to the extreme of what you're wanting, knowing
Yes.
you're going to get pushback, and then you'll come back to that center, right? So
Yep.
I think it was Mr. Wonderful who, I don't know that much about him, but I know he was proposing this mega data center in the middle of Utah, and it was the size of it was staggering. Everything that he knew of art was saying about it was staggering. I was like, how in the world is that going to fly? And of course it didn't. I don't know eventually if he's going to scale that down or whatever it is, but what they're doing is they're just shotgunning everything, and then they're going to see what hits the target. Because if I throw 1 million up there and I only need 500,000, hey, half of these are going to fall out. We don't really care. And at the same time you're seeing this, you're seeing excess amounts of liquidity. It's a bubble, and in bubbles, a lot of money is spent, and it's spent very unwisely and very improperly and very without reason and biblical principles, if you will. So we're in the time, especially post-COVID, where there was trillions of dollars printed and put into the economy, and so they're going to take all of that, and then now they're inflating a bubble, which is the AI bubble, whether it's chips, data centers, software, hardware, you name it. It is being just funneled into there on an excessive scale. And if you think about it, it's like wartime spending. If a country's fighting for its life, they're going to just put everything into tanks and guns and soldiers and all the crazy killing stuff. Well, this is kind of that for this new technocracy for the new age. Who doesn't matter who's in power, they are going to use the idea that we're doing well economically and put a lot of money, and all of that. Most of it's probably ill spent, but it doesn't matter because it will achieve what they want, and they will capitalize on the crash anyway. So when everything pops and deflates, who's left holding the bag? Of course, the small people, you guys mentioned the pensions, the 401ks. I mean, you got BlackRock, Vanguard, all these $1 trillion mega assets under management, and they are putting, trillions of dollars toward it, along with the U.S. government. So they don't really care about, the small person, because they're the ones heading the ship, and it's doing exactly what they want. Obviously, we know God has the final say, but this is going according to the plan that they've laid out. And messy as it is, they don't really care. They just see the end goal when it's completed.
Yep.
Most of us have been watching prophecy for decades, and so think about 25 years ago. We're sitting there, we're thinking, pondering, pontificating, whoever we were, and we're all reading Revelation 13. So we're looking at the elements that are found there, the political elements, the economic elements, and certainly the religious elements that are there, and we all have this idea that for the Antichrist and the false prophet to accomplish their dominion, which they're given fully, for the last 3.5 years. So we're thinking, well, they're going to be able to control, right? So we say these things generically, but now 25 years ago, nobody was talking about a data center, but now we're watching the infrastructure of exactly what we knew would happen based on Scripture. Now we're seeing the elements that are being created, fabricated. The technology has continued to expand to accomplish exactly what we all knew the Bible taught. So to me, inherent within the question is, should we be paying attention to this? And you use the word infrastructure. Absolutely. What we're observing, it's not going away. It's impossible for it to go away, because Scripture is going to be true. And so the other thing, though, is as we've been saying over and over, and the timing. The timing is accelerating. We keep hearing 2030 and other things, and but no doubt this is not going away. It reminds me as well of the other thing I was going to bring up in the previous section was, our friend Joe Hawkins sent me an article which was really good, in that it described. This was one of the things I was going to bring up for what thing that was powerful was Elon Musk, who you guys probably know my view on the 10 kings and the technocrats and other things. I'm talking about that for many years. So, he became the first trillionaire, right? Okay, so that's pretty amazing, and that was this sheer powerful element. But one of the things that he's been talking about for years finally came to fruition, and that was taking X and making it a financial element. So it's officially, you can do payments now on X for the premium subscribers and others, and it's going to eventually trickle out. But when you think about that is a huge development, because it's not that, oh, wow, I have Venmo or I have Cash App. Yeah, that's true. But the fact of the matter, here's a guy that is incorporating, communication and online, communities like X, news, all in one package. And the other thing, too, we know his background with PayPal That's why he dreamed of X becoming a financial, basically, powerhouse. So, and you think about how much more money is going to end up flowing through these digital places, and he's going to get a piece of the pie. So, is he on his way to the 2 trillion mark? But nevertheless, I think we all agree that these technocrats, these unelected people, are extremely influential and powerful, and as we saw over the past few years, we're able to dictate things to governments, world governments, and so that's not going away. And I do think that what we're seeing with the infrastructure of the data centers is going to be providing the information for these technocrats to use and all the different platforms and finances, etc. But this conglomeration that we're seeing develop is Revelation 13, and it's just it's actually really fun, but yet at the same time, a little terrifying watching it unfold before our eyes. But this is why we're here, is in order to say, look, the Bible has said this a long time. We didn't fully understand 25 years ago all the mechanics, but now we're watching it unfold, and what's going to be here in 6 months, or more with, and again, even AI, which we can talk about too, all the developments there, that's not going away either.
No, well said, Mondo.
And if you think a politician is going to fight this, I just want to remind everybody that Trump just did a press conference recently, and they asked him about the data centers, and he literally, you guys can go fact check this, everybody in the chat. He told them basically on camera, said, he told the communities, instead of fighting it, embrace it.
Embrace it.
And,
yep.
this should
Liquid
not be
gold.
shocking because he's spearheading Stargate, which they need
Yeah.
this infrastructure. And I like what B Dog said, and I'm just going to come off that real quick or kind of hinge off of that. Is I believe that the data centers are the infrastructure for the smart cities coming. They have to build the infrastructure first. That's the foundation. And then I'm going to borrow your tinfoil hat there, Gary, real quick. Let me put it on real quick.
Everyone, please bring their hat for
Yeah, yeah.
next time. Next time,
Right.
show up with your hat on, okay?
The wildfires, Maui, California, places like this. I would not be surprised that when the after effects of that comes through, and it comes through, don't be shocked when they start putting data centers up in these areas that got mowed down by the fires. How convenient would that be? I'm just saying, I would not be shocked if you start seeing that happening.
Can I just piggyback off what both you and Mondo have said? Because I've been looking at, I'm in the new book that I'm writing, I'm talking in the last chapter about praxis. Now, praxis is supported by the PCAS system around Trump. All of those guys, Sam Altman, Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, all of those, they invest into praxis for the idea of a technocratic superstate. And for ages, it was focused in on Greenland, and then they changed to focus in on a place in California, near the Space Force base, and they're wanting to buy the land there. Now, this is run by a guy called Dryden Brown. Dryden Brown has given prescribed literature to his workers to read. And what was he giving them? SS material, Ariosophy material, Theosophy from Madame Blavatsky, all of this to read. They want to call the first tech state. Now this is kind of derivative, an offshoot off a thing that happened in 2012 called Game B. This idea of technocrats coming together and foreseeing what the future would look like. But what they've decided to call this first place is Atlas. Now, people will automatically go to Atlas, the world on his shoulders, the Titan. But if you take Plato's writings of Atlas, and you take the connotation that Dryden Brown believes in Ariosophy, the same works of Himmler. Himmler believed in Atlantis. Atlantis, under Plato's writings, had 10 kings. The first of those kings was Atlas. He was the first ruler of the 10. And it just, for me, there's too much writing on the wall to completely ignore it. And I know people think I've got a tinfoil hat, but that's okay. So I wonder if anybody else sees that. There seems to be some knowledge within the technocratic community about the direction in which they're going.
Well, I would just say that, according to Ephesians, that, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and powers and wickedness, etc. And we know that right now they're being restrained by the Holy Spirit's ministry of restraint in this dispensation. So they're not able to fully just come out, but they're not appearing like on the White House lawn, like so many Hollywood movies would show or whatever, but fallen angels can manifest physically. I have no doubt that they are interacting at the highest levels in the deep state and all of these kind of super secretive organizations, that they are orchestrating an influence, a campaign of influence to get these leaders moving in particular directions because they have the foresight to know what's coming. So they are using all of these kind of excuses like climate change or equity or whatever, and they're selling it like that to these humans. But then behind those motivations, those superficial motivations, are the real agendas. It's preparing the world for the coming beast kingdom. So it seems like these guys are being influenced, and I would even go so far to say as Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, all of these guys are, because they all end up kind of doing the same thing. They're all building bunkers. They're all looking for escape plans off the planet. Like they're trying to get, the moon mission going by 2030. They're trying to, create some type of immortality through genetics, genetic engineering, like the Methuselah Project. They're all invested heavily in kind of immortalizing themselves through AI or through, whatever they can do to put the technology into the human body. So it just seems like they're all marching to the same drum, the same drummer. So it's so that same drummer, we know that the God of this world is Satan, and he is currently running the planet according to 1 John 5:19. So he is giving them their marching orders, and they're in lockstep. So it's like we're in the matrix, and if you're not unplugged from the matrix via being born again, you're able to be manipulated by these things to achieve whatever ends that they want to have in place. And so I think we argue, I would say out of the six of us here, we may not all agree on what year Christ was crucified or what year he was born or what year creation began. But the demons and Satan in particular, they were there. There's no
That's
argument amongst them. They know exactly what year, what day, the time of day. They know when creation began. So they know this is the end game right here. They know they're at the end, and so they are quickly using these humans, their human puppets, to go do what they need to do prior to the restrainer being removed. So.
Well said, Pete. Very well said. Any of y'all have anything else you want to add before I go on to our next to last question?
One quick thing. What's insane about this is these guys, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all of them, they're saying things out in the open now. They're not even saying things in behind closed doors. They're being open and transparent. Peter Thiel just came out and said, you can find it out there in TikTok somewhere. And he said, we believe likely that AI is going to destroy humanity. But the good news is we'll have great career opportunities from it in the meanwhile. It's like, what? And people are cheering this. Like, it's like, what clown world are we in? Like, this is crazy.
No, and you know what? Now that you said Peter Thiel, I'm sure y'all remember, but a few months ago, he had his big Antichrist convention where he was teaching on the Antichrist. And from what I understand, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was stating that his technology and all this stuff that he is involved in is going to keep the Antichrist at bay.
Right.
And I said, huh? Like, what Bible are you reading? Because I'm pretty sure the Word of God says the opposite of that. So that to me was like, what is this? Like, it's just, and people probably have cognitive dissonance with that if they're following this guy or they don't know the things that we know about this guy.
Yeah, that reminds me of in the 40s and 30s when it was the propagandists, and they were like, if you tell that lie and you get out in front of the story and put your version out there, well, that's the first version people hear, the mass. And they're like, oh, well, no, these are the good guys, right? And Peter Thiel, I saw a random article where he's trying to get bunkered in Argentina. So he's been meeting with Javier Milei. That's like the end of the world, and that's like the most safest spot, that in New Zealand, right? So, so they're preparing for this, and they know right well. And I think whether they know it or not, they are. I don't know if you say demonically charged, but they're operating in some sort of a supernatural way through that dark side that gives them, access. And I think you see that especially in right now, we're seeing a lot in, I keep my lane. I would say prophecy is my hobby and, what I do passion, work with my family and things like that. Obviously selling gold and silver and taking care of people that way is more of a pay the bills ministry work. It's what I do to prepare people for what's coming. But, at the end of the day, there's a lot that's going on that I see in the financial world. You've got things like Tether, which are stable coins. So I was reading the other day about the founder of Tether. I forget his name right off the top of my head. Is a Spanish fellow. I want to say he's from Spain. Headquarters in El Salvador, but Tether is a stable coin. So they tapped that coin or that Tether to a stable object. In this case, most people, it's famous USDT is a treasury. So it's stabilized to $1. So that's kind of what they're famous for. But Tether has been on a binge for buying gold because the founder of Tether said, he goes, I know that the Western civilization, the Western powers, the Western economies are going to collapse. And that's what I've been preparing for. So just recently they got Sharia approved for Tether to have a Sharia-like digital currency that is going to be in part based on gold. So is China. So everyone, and I know these subjects because that's what I deal with all day. But I can see that part of the pizza, right? That slice is being very well set up. So pretty soon you're going to have, all of the Muslims, which is quite a bit of the world. Then you'll have a lot of the Chinese, which is quite a bit of the world. Moving on to India, they all know gold and silver. Then you have the Western economies, which have their own currencies. Well, you crash those, and then everyone's going to clamor back for a stability. Obviously, it will be digital, but it will need a physical backing. So all of these pieces are coming together, and they're coming together from all around the world. They're not just like, oh, here's one, and then it's connecting to that one. They're just starting their self, and they're starting to build together until they link up. And it's quite remarkable to see how fast it's happening. And when the crisis hits, if there's an economic reset, if there is a crash greater than the Great Depression, which we all believe, or I believe, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that is going to just put on steroids that rollout of that digital system when you can't eat, or when you need your rations, or when you need to do whatever, whether it's because there's no fuel or there's no food or whatever the case is, you're going to sign right up, or the mass will sign right up for that digital passport, and it will be easy for the powers that be.
Yeah, and see that reminds me, going back to 2020, exactly what they did in 2020. It was a run. It was a dry run for all the stuff that we are still seeing now. And just like you said, David, is that it's not like this country's doing this and this country's doing that, and those things are happening, but they're merging together, just like Pastor Gary said at the outset, ecumenicism. Well, that term can kind of be used in a lot of different arenas, at different slices of the pizza, because it is all coming together to serve one end goal.
Yep.
It's even both sides of the coin, or the two wings of the bird. You have those who are crying out for nationalism and those who are crying out for globalism. But one of the interesting things is that, I don't know if everybody would agree with this, but I see what's happening now is very much mirroring that which happened in 1930s, 1940s Germany and Europe. In terms of economic crash with the Wall Street crash, the growth of populism, but also even you look at the rhetoric and the belief systems. Peter Thiel, he believes in the same political theology of Carl Schmitt, the famous juror from World War II. Carl Schmitt believed that the restrainer in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 was nationalism, and therefore the Nazi party were the restrainer. So that's why he joined the Nazi party. So in that sense, what did the rise of nationalism do? Well, the rise of nationalism, you could say, and in his thought, that was stopping globalism. But the major product that came off the rise of that was the development of the UN. So when the UN happened, that was globalism off the back of that. And you start to see these strategies and these patterns play out. And then you can look at the likes of, the writings of Lincoln Bloomfield in 1962 and how the UN would be a one world global government. And I just see that what we're witnessing now is that same pattern just play out at a much faster pace.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Well said, Pastor Gary. Agreed. And that reminds me of that. I saw that quote earlier this week by Paul Henry Spake about he's for the world of nations or whatever he was for, and he said something about give us God or a devil, we will accept him. And it was referring to this leader that could handle everything. And that was all the way back, was that the 50s, 60s, whatever it was.
1953.
Thank you. And it's like, but look at where people are. I mean, I realize we have a lot of people fighting against globalism, but you know what they will accept? Because again, it's the Hegelian dialectic in play. We've got the problem, we've got the reaction, and they already got the solution. And the solution is Revelation 13. That's what it is. Yeah. But since people are pushing against globalism with fierce vigor, they'll accept regionalism. They'll accept that. They'll accept 213 nations or whatever it is going down to 10. They'll accept that because it's not quite as bad. I think I get all fired up thinking about 2020, and Lance and I were getting so mad at everybody letting them scan their foreheads and wrists going into the gym. And we were like, no, you're not doing that because we know where this leads. But this is the same. It's just on a bigger scale. But that's where it's headed. So... Yep. All right. Well, that was a rant. I'll quiet down now. Okay. So, all All right, the next question that we have, kind of related to what we've been talking about, and then we'll have you guys answer the final question here, but again, came from another member of the underground. I've been hearing for months about food supply concerns, and I feel like a lot of this, you guys, is scare tactics and stuff like that, and I loathe it, but I think this is a good question. El Nino and the possibility of shortages. Is this something Christians should be paying attention to, and should believers be preparing? And if so, what does biblical wisdom look like in this scenario? So I'd love for one of y'all or all of y'all to take the floor on what you think about that.
I'll go real quick. This ain't gonna take very long. So my answer to that is common sense. Now I know we have a panel here. We all believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. So when I say this kind of strikes a chord with some people out there, but I believe in prepping to some degree. Now I don't believe in the Jim Baker extreme measures of this. Sorry, I didn't mean to name drop, but kind of did. But anyway, I do believe that we should, common sense, man, have a supply of fresh water, canned and non-perishable foods, extra batteries, flashlights, candles, generators if possible, whether they be gas or solar. You need to have some way of communication with your family if communication goes down. I am one that I've warned our group, our listeners, that I can see a power grid failure coming down, whether that be through the data center load, whether it be a cyber attack. I mean, there was a report that came out over the past couple of days, suspected Iranian hackers struck Minnesota water supplies. You had 30 water plants in Minnesota alone that they were struck with that. United Airlines mysteriously experienced a glitch and grounded all those flights. You've got the phone issues happening. And then last but not least, excuse me, I believe if you go to the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 41, there was a famine coming to Egypt. And some will say, well, you don't have faith if you have a supply of food, or you prep, so to say, or have these things in hand. But when I read the Bible, Joseph was instructed by the Lord to instruct Pharaoh when, God gave, and this is mind blowing too, God gave Pharaoh, a wicked leader who wasn't even serving God, gave him a dream, showed him prophetically what was going to happen. And then Joseph was there of the Lord, interpreted the dream, and then gave him instructions on how to survive the famine. And what did he tell him to do? Told him to store ahead, put aside, and prepare, for the 7 years of famine that was coming. And I believe, we've been really blessed here in the West not to really experience this kind of hardship. But when I read the Bible, and you guys know this, I see this coming in the days ahead. So I think it's just wisdom. I think this is practical wisdom to be prepared. And again, guys, if you live on the West Coast, you got to be prepared for wildfires, earthquakes. You live in certain areas, you're going to deal with flooding. You're going to deal with tornadoes and Tornado Alley. So all of these, merit preparations. The prudent man sees danger coming, and he takes action.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I literally wrote down the verse. I was just going to quote it, Ricky. Proverbs 22:3. The prudent sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you said, Ricky, is something that I've seen a lot over the past few years in the prophecy remnant group, in that all of us are so excited for the Lord's return as we see all these things happening. It's hard not to get excited, that we tend to come to maybe an extreme form of escapism. We know we're going to escape. Scripture clearly teaches that, Luke 21 and 1 Thessalonians 5. So we know that there is an escape, Luke 17, other passages. But I think sometimes, at least in America, we live relatively free and comfortable. But we tend to think that our way of life is going to continue all the way up until the rapture rescue moment. And that's not the case. I actually think that the church is going to there's going to be more pressure as it relates to the timing. I think that the church is going to be put under, everywhere is going to be, especially in America, we're going to be put under difficult situations. And you asked for the sake of wisdom, and as you quoted Proverbs 22, and the word there, ra in Hebrew is, it is the most generic term you can use for something that is either evil or danger different translations, or adversity or trouble. There's all the different things. It's very broad. And it's saying that when you look down the pike and you see potential trouble, all the things that we've been discussing, the wise person considers it and it does things to try to alleviate some of those things. Now, granted, none of us, even if we were post-tribbers, none of us are going to have 7 years worth of food and water, power for each member of our family. And because we're Christians, we got to help the neighbor out. We're not going to shoot somebody that's looking for food, right? So there's no way that theoretically, even if we were post-trib, that we could store all that up. It's impossible
Right.
to be a Christian. But so I think the first thing is, as the first most important wise thing as a Christian, as a prophecy watcher, is we need to get out of our mindset that it's going to be easy all the way up until, or our standard. That's the first thing. And so therefore, when we look at these other things, we go, everything Ricky said, have something on hand, have at least some minimal preparations, because again, I'm not preparing for 7 years, but it is wise to recognize we need to have some. And then of course you can look more of a long-term, different financial situations, other things, gold, silver, other ways to preserve wealth. Those are all wise, but I think it's our mentality is the first thing that needs to be kind of helped.
Well said, Mondo. I'm so glad you said that, because again, I believe the rapture is near. But if the Lord's appointed time is not tomorrow, there could be tumultuous times ahead. And just as Ricky said, we in the West have not had to experience that. So I think a lot of us are a bit clueless, and I can own that. I was born in '85. I've not, we've seen a lot since I was born. Never, my granny went through the Depression. My granny didn't have shoes because that's how broke they were. She had to go to school barefoot, and they had the same meal every day because that's all they could afford. I ain't never seen nothing like that. Pray to the Lord that we don't. But the point is that those before us have seen those kind of things, and here we are. We're in the end times, so put 2 and 2 together and make 4. So does anybody else have something they want to say on that?
I think it's also, what are we prepping for if we're prepping? In Acts 11 and Acts 21, there's a prophet mentioned called Agabus, and Agabus foresees a famine coming, and Josephus writes about that famine, and he talks about that there was a 3-year famine across the empire, but Josephus records that it was actually the church who stepped up. And I think back to COVID, we had to be smart because the police came and closed places down. We don't have the same legal system as other countries. And so what we did is we started a food bank and used that to, I just happened to speak at the food bank. Oh, we're singing at the food bank. But it was a way in which we could actually reach people and actually be the hands and feet of Jesus in that moment too. And I think that, we never, if we're prepping, we don't prep out of fear, because we're not given the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So when we prepare, we're preparing for others as well. And whether that's gold, silver, whether that's food, whatever it is, it is for being that witness of Jesus Christ, and not just speaking it out, but actually living it out.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah, I guess this does touch on, where I don't know if I have a lot of experience, because, we all come from different places, but, I really do feel like what I do is a ministry. And this is not something that let me rewind a bit. We're right on, my wife and I, our 9-year anniversary of coming to California. I was born and raised in Central Texas. I grew up on a ranch. I had a pretty good life where, both sets of grandparents, my parents, everything was, God-centered. And so I kind of lived that dream. But, somewhere around 2018, my wife and I and my 4 boys at the time felt God's, he's calling us. It wasn't just felling, it was a telling. He said, go to California. So I packed up and went. Wasn't a place I wanted to go, but it was a place he sent me. So I have been here with my family, and we've grown and planted ever since. But my mentality back in Texas, being on a ranch, anything I needed, I either had, or my dad had, or my grandfather had, or I could just run down and get it. And we lived west of Austin. And so it's grown significantly since then. But once I moved here to Southern California, it's crazy. I I'm a prepper mindset because I realize suddenly I don't have any of the access to the things I used to have. If we ran out, I could just go get some water from some sort of a creek that didn't have trash floating in it, and I could probably boil it and drink it, right? If the worst comes to worst. Here, you don't want to touch anything that doesn't come, at least pre-cleaned. So, my family does a modicum of prepping. We have several months worth of food. I have 6 children now, and so we don't have as much as I'd like. I'd like to have a little bit more because, I think Ricky mentioned that, earthquakes are that little thing that I have yet to experience the full glory of, if you will. So I'm hoping that, maybe I won't have to, but there is a certain preparation that, I think that we have to be ready for. And you kind of had obviously the last question, and I had prepared something for this, but I think it fits better here, is that the other day I was reading, I think it was like 2 days ago, I was reading Matthew 25, and something stood out to me that's never stood out to me before. We always kind of see the parables when Jesus is talking. He usually references, out of nowhere, here comes the master, out of nowhere, here comes the answer. But if you read the first parables there in Matthew 25, there's 2 verses that stick out, and I highlighted them here. First one's verse 5 that has to do with the wise and foolish virgins. Verse 5 of chapter 25 of Matthew says, "But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept." So we're always expecting this sudden appearing, which we should be prepared for. But often before that is this delay that the bridegroom, who is, the chief, the boss, he gets to choose the delay. No one says here why he's delayed. He's just delayed. And then if you go to the next parable, the one of the talents, verse 19 says, "After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them." So there was a delay in both of these parables. Surely he came probably out of nowhere. There was a cry heard for the virgins, and they woke up. But there was a delay that caused this kind of like mindset of tiredness, sleepiness, and hey, I'm not going to be able to make it. I know this transitions into the last question, but for this right here, this is what you have to prepare for, is that I heard a pastor refer to as that middle, right? He called it a muddle, because in the middle is where things happen. Usually we start out good and we end good, but it's that middle part that's squishy. It's the middle part that where we get distracted, we get tired, we're not sure. And there's so many times when it's like patience, endurance, in your patience possess ye your souls. So there's a lot of that said for preparing. And I absolutely believe that part of this is the food, it is the water, it is everything else. There is, I believe, a prolonged financial crisis that people need to get prepared for. That's why I do what I do. But without it, you cannot say, I'm going to do this, but that means I'm not trusting God, because that is exactly what Ricky said about Joseph is what God spoke to me a long time ago, is that, hey, he's got a plan. And his plan was to get Jacob and family out of Canaan, right? He had told Abraham many years before, hey, the Amorites, their iniquity is not yet full. There's going to be this time, and then there's just going to be this whole sequence. Well, that had to happen some way. He used a famine to do it. And so that happened, and then it's gone away. And I always look at the New Testament as well. It says in the early parts, they all began to sell property. They began to sell houses to fund that early church. Well, if you look at it, you're like, well, that was, a lot of people reference communism, which is completely idiotic. But, that being aside, it's very clear that the property values of Jerusalem in those later years, a few decades later, everything was going to zero. So God was just kind of preparing everybody to say, hey, look, let's take care of some things early. These aren't going to be any value to you later. So why don't we, take care of these now? So, there's a lot to be said about preparing, and it does take a mindset shift. And I pray that people do it quicker than later.
Well said. Okay. Am I good to go on to the last question? This is a good one. It's a really good one for y'all. Okay, so this comes from Tavi. She wrote this in the underground as well. And this, I asked her, I said, this is so good. You care if I use this for the panel? She said, no, I'd love that. So she wrote, in our community, many believers feel the Lord's return could be very near. Yet sometimes hear respected prophecy teachers discuss timelines that stretch 5 or even 10 years into the future. How do we maintain a genuine sense of urgency while also cultivating the endurance Scripture calls us to if the Lord tarries?
Well, I'll speak about that because, again, throughout the past few years, especially within a lot of you know I do astrophotography and love to see take pictures of the heavens, and with our Psalm 19 project, it's kind of fun. Um, but it's interesting watching the developments over the past few years. Um, in that, like, for example, in April of 24 there was the solar eclipse, and then you go back to 2017 of August, and there was the other solar eclipse, and it makes an X, and therefore it is, and the rapture's on this date. So we see a lot of the date setting that happens, or other things that have taken place, which have, again, we're all excited, but I think a lot of it has produced. I get the emails, and that's why I get a little frustrated sometimes. Is I get emails from people who say, I'm done. I'm done. I can't take the highs and the lows and the here's and there's, and I get all worked up, and then nothing happens, and the date setting and the high watch times and all these other things. So no, that's not, I mean, some people can handle it no problem, and that's fine. I'm not necessarily against that, but I think publicly speaking, we've seen it. So I've come to, even in some of my presentations, I always end on two verses, because I think it keeps the balance. Is in Mark 13:37, Jesus commands us. It's not a suggestion. We're commanded to watch. Very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So we are commanded to watch. That's not an option. But the second thing is in Luke 19:13, the parable that Jesus gives there about a king going away for a long time, right? Exactly what we're talking about, the coming back. And he says, occupy until I come.
Yeah.
So we have these two commandments, but now I've come to say, listen, Jesus said to occupy until he actually comes. Okay, do we have to use the word actually? Because there's so much predictions and other things that gets people there, that they think in terms of like, well, why are you guys doing this? Because here's the thing is, I have family members who were not raised in a pre-trib mentality, right? So in talking to them, even I have son-in-laws now, and many of them were raised, again, in a maybe partial preterist or amillennial idea. So for them, think about it this way. I remember mistakes I made, 25 years ago when I was a youth pastor, and in the late 90s. And some of the kids would say, well, Mondo, what do you think? What do you think? Oh, man, guaranteed 2000, no later than 2010. Oh, man, should I go to college? There's no need to go to college. Okay, so, oh my God, right? So I'm speaking from my own mistakes. And so in the same way, what I would say is, look, because I get the same emails, Lauren, is how can you guys, 5 years, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Aren't you even watching? And you go, look, Jesus said to occupy until he actually comes. And so, like, for my son-in-laws and stuff that are younger, and obviously they're married to my daughters, they're like, well, what do you think? I go, have a 50-year plan. Absolutely have a 50-year plan. There's nothing wrong with that, because none of us know how long the Lord could delay or whatever. None of us. Again, in the late 90s, guaranteed 2010. Okay, well, here we are. So in that sense, I would say that as Christians, we actually have to obey what Jesus said, is that we need to be putting into wisdom, planning and occupying until he actually does come. And that includes planning 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, knowing that the Lord can delay if he wants. Now, I hope he doesn't. I'm ready today. But those two scriptures weigh heavy on all of us. And so we shouldn't get angry when some of us talk about having plans or thinking in terms of 2050, or heck, Isaac Newton said 2067, 2068. God forbid. But nevertheless, that's my rant.
I love that. Let me add this to the broadcast really quick, because Mondo, if something happens, Pete's coming to your house. So just so it's said, like, just so you know, if Pete Garcia shows up on your door,
I got room.
Go ahead, Ricky.
Well, I just want to say I'm 100% in agreement with what Mondo said. I can't tell you how many emails and hate mail and blasting I get because, again, I just want to preface this. I'm a rapture believer. I believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. Here are inevitable facts. One, Jesus said, in this world you shall have tribulation. He didn't say you'll go through the tribulation.
That's right.
You will have tribulation, which is difficulty, trials. We don't understand this in the West, but you go outside of the West, they understand that. they're actually getting real persecution, not soft persecution. Number two, if anybody knows our ministry, I'm vehemently against date setting. And every year you can mark, I've been doing this for 26 years. When you get into the high feast days and the fall feast, you got Teshuvah, you got Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Atonement. You're going to see this all over social media. Oh, the Lord's given me this revelation, and they'll do the gematria, and they'll use these calculations, and because of the cosmic signs, and they'll tell you the Lord's coming back, this and that. I even stay away from and you'll get this, and I even saw this in the comments, Lauren. How long do you think you got? I think this is a dangerous thing to be entertaining, because here's why. I believe it causes a reproach to the body of Christ. Now, for all of us here on this panel, we're mature in the Lord, and we understand how to navigate through this. But if you got new baby Christians out here that don't understand this, and they get swept up in, and trust me, they will, on TikTok and YouTube and all the algorithms that will throw that garbage in your face. I made this point. I think you, Gary, me, and Pete was on a broadcast one time, and I said, "Do you ever notice that on your algorithms, it always shows you false doctrine, but it never shows you truth? You get flooded with all kinds of weird nonsense, but why doesn't it ever show you the truth?" So, the enemy knows what he's doing. So I tell people, here's the deal, that I believe, and this is where I'm different than a lot of traditional pre-tribulation or even rapture teaching teachers or pastors, or whatever the case may be. I believe personally that the body of Christ is going to be here and see more than what we've been taught over the years. I think we're going to see and go through and experience. Now, look, I know that'll probably start a riot in the chat, but look,
not here.
Lauren,
Here.
Lauren, look at your grandmother.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if she was a believer, I guarantee she thought, well, the Lord's going to take us out at any moment. We're not going to go through this. The people that went through the Holocaust, the people that went through, these wars. What about all of our brothers and sisters in Syria and all these places? What if they heard some of this Western teaching that we're hearing, that the body of Christ is never going to experience anything negative, never experience any major disasters. I just don't. Again, I want to say I don't believe that we will be appointed to the wrath of God, but there's a difference between the wrath of God and selective judgments and disasters and so on and so forth. So last point, I believe that we should live every day as if the Lord could return at any moment, but prepare as if though we were going to be around for a long time. That's my final closing thought.
That's good. That's good. Anybody else?
I would say that it has to do with your mindset, and just kind of like we see in 2 Peter, in recognizing the special times in which we live, and appreciating the fact that God put us here in the very last moments of the last days, and He's allowing us to see these things, and seeing a lot of Bible prophecy come into view, but arranging itself in the way that Bible prophecy says it's going to arrange itself. And I think that's a high privilege for us. And I know many of us would wish that the rapture were 5 minutes ago, and I totally get that. But the longer that we're here, and whatever time we have left, whether it's days, weeks, months, or years, I think that we should really consider ourselves that fortunate generation to even be alive in times like this. I mean, the times that the prophets and the angels long to look into is the times that we're currently inhabiting. And so I kind of look at it as a privilege. And I think when you understand that it's a privilege rather than a burden, then we kind of shift that mindset to staying busy with the task at hand, as well as looking up and keeping our optimism and our hope and our lamps recharged, as it were, because I was looking for the Lord to come back in 2011, from around 2008 forward. But in 2011, it really started, because at that time, it was 7 years before 2018, and 2018 was 70 years from Israel's birthday. And I mean, it was all over the place. And so every few years we'll see these hypes come up, and it seems to be happening more and more frequently as we come into the 2030 time period. And All I know is that it's soon. We know we're in the season. We know that it's not decades away. We know it could be a few years, but I mean, there's so many things in play right now that if it keeps going on without even, if we set aside the rapture, set aside prophecy, set aside all that stuff, there are things that are happening now that are unsustainable going forward, even beyond 10 years, whether you're talking about population collapsing for various nations and the economy and 40 trillion in debt. And there's so many different things that we're doing now that are basically, there's probably like 20 different existential threats right now to the world. It used to just be like nuclear weapons or like a rogue asteroid. Now it's like, we can create synthetic pandemics. We can have, a solar storm that wipes out all of technology. And we're going back to like year one. There's so many things that could happen now. So the threat is much more elevated than it's ever been. And so anyways, just consider it a privilege. Consider the times in which you live. I mean, you could have been born in the 12th century or the 7th century and just lived in some village where nobody knew who you were and you never traveled beyond 5 miles. So that could have been your whole life. And for millions of people, that's their reality. And look at where would they have traded where they were to where we are today? Probably. They would have loved to have seen the things that we're seeing today, and how prophecy is not just, we're not looking at the mark of the beast as some kind of impossibility now. We're looking at it, okay, which way is it going to happen? Because there's 15 different kinds of chips that could come out that could be implemented. And so it's not how it's going to happen, but which way is it going to happen? So we know it's coming. The world every day is looking increasingly more like Revelation 13 than the day before. So I just think it starts with your mindset. Just thank God that you're alive. Thank God for your blessings. Thank God for allowing you to live in such a times as this, and appreciate it and make the most of your time that you have.
Well said, Pete. Pastor Gary, and then David, y'all have something to add? Go ahead.
I just want to second that. It is mindset based. I remember there was a big one last year where people were saying, I think September, October.
23rd. Yeah, September 23rd.
And I had so many messages telling me that I was an apostate preacher. I didn't have the Holy Spirit. I said, no, rapture's not going to happen then, because you said it's going to happen then, so it's not going to happen then. Right. And I think it's this mindset. The way I liken it is that when I was fighting as an amateur, you had a set number of rounds, you generally 3 rounds. And then when I went from amateur to pro, I had a wake-up call, because I had been used to fighting at a pace for 3 rounds, expecting in the 3rd round I could go back to the corner and I could breathe. And I remember my first pro fight was 7 rounds. And I went back to the corner after the 3rd round, and my cornerman said, You've got to go. The bell's gone. You've got to go back and fight. And I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm ready to go now. And I think it's that mindset. We think we've had enough. That's it. But we're called to be in a spiritual fight. Ephesians 6, we're told to stand, put on the full regalia of the armor, and to stand. And we're to fight that which is in front of us. So whether that's a case of open borders, beheadings in the street, cultural changes to do away with Judeo-Christian principles in your territory, you're still to stand against the tide. You're still to pick up your spiritual warfare, your spiritual armor, but also your spiritual weapons of 2 Corinthians 10, where we pray, we declare, we speak the word of God. And I'm of this sort of attitude that I get frustrated sometimes in the prophecy world that it's seen like fortune telling. That people are going to watch a prophetic teaching or something about the book of Revelation, and what they're expecting is the same as what they would get if they went to see a psychic, that you will tell them 2029, this will happen, 2030, this will happen, 2031, this will happen. And effectively what we can only do is point to scripture and say, this scripture is unveiling, this is converging, things are happening right now, and this is what we see. And I think that if we get the mindset right and we realize that we're maybe in a 12-rounder, not a 3-rounder, we're maybe in the point of realizing that our job isn't to look to the end, but our job is to fight that round that we're standing in and the spiritual enemy in front of us. Well said. Then that gives us the patience and perseverance to carry on.
That was good. Preach, Pastor Gary. That was good. David, do you have anything to add before I close this out?
Yeah, I'll tag in. I agree. There's nothing I could agree with more. But at the end, I made a statement to my friend. I think it was yet 2 days ago. I was talking about exactly, I think, what Mondo had talked about earlier was, hey, when I grew up, it's like, I don't know if I'll get married. I don't know, God's probably going to come back. I'll be a teenager or whatever. And it's like, it was kind of frustrating, but you get through those things, and then you suddenly you have kids of your own, and you're like, I don't know, will they get married? And so I've got 6 kids, and I have 5 boys, and then the daughter at the end. And my oldest is 17. He'll be 18 this November. But my daughter, she's only 4. And so I've been looking at her thinking, will she get married? Will, will she have a husband? Because the dynamic is completely, for me, maybe it's not for you guys because you have multiples, but I have, with a daughter, it's like having a first child all over again. And my friend, I was telling this to my friend, and he's like, don't say that. He's like, we were always told that, and it messed a lot of us up. He said, just believe that she's, whatever God has is going to be okay. Like, she may marry, she may not. But when you kind of like fit your expectations in, it does put something on those younger generations. So obviously, in what the passage that Mondo mentioned as well, the one that goes along with Matthew 25, is that, occupy till I come is like a business description. It's like, okay, here's an investment. I want you, as one of my workers, as one of my servants, go make me some profit on that. And so if I'm working for the king, if I need to know what time it is, I'll tune into one of these shows here and see what's going on with Israel. If that's God's timepiece, then, hey, I know he's getting really close, or, hey, we still got a little time maybe, but I'm able to catch up with that. But the idea is not to get weary in well-doing. It's not to stay and just say, hey, I can't take it anymore. You can't go to those extremes, because that's what the enemy tries to do. Get you really far one way and then springboard you back. And with that, like violent wrestling, that's what wears people out. And you just have to say, today, maybe just like, yesterday, and maybe like tomorrow, but I know I'm one day closer. God's got a job for me to do, and be patient. And it's hard. I mean, I've experienced it too, when you're just looking at the same thing over and over, but don't be weary in well doing. God has a plan. Just follow him, and he'll take care of us.
Oh, awesome. That was good. That was good, David. Well, guys, I cannot thank y'all enough for being on here today. I didn't expect quite to go an hour and a half, so I may have to adjust my outlines a little for the next time. But hey, thanks for being the guinea pigs on the first episode. It was so fun. You guys just always have such amazing insight and outlooks, and again, biblical wisdom and knowledge. And this is why all of us love all of you guys so much. And we kind of pose the hard questions to you guys that we're wrestling with. So thank you guys for being on. And thank you to the moderators for hanging out in the chat, and everybody who showed up today. And I think next time, y'all know what to do. Go ahead and keep your eyes on the sky and keep your ear listening for that shofar. We'll see you guys in the next one. Maranatha.